Hello and welcome to Ranlif Reviews. I'm Ranlif, and let me ask you a question. Have you ever played a pen and paper role-playing game and rolled 10 ones in a row, and then rage quit by flipping the damn table in front of all your friends as they cackled, and you slowly spiraled into a pit of despair and loneliness as if your life had no meaning anymore? No, just me? Well, if you've had that problem too, then this game is for you. Today we're going to be looking at Darkest Dungeon, a game from Red Hick Studios. The game began as a successful Kickstarter, raising $300K, and the game is now in early access on Steam. Went in early access a couple months back, and they're looking at a Q3 2015 release. But unlike most early access titles, I will tell you, all the core features are in the game. They already have 10 classes. They're mainly just adding 2 more areas to the Explorer in the game, and they're going to continually add classes, they've said. So you're not getting into some total clusterfuck that, the developers just needed the money and they just put out some total turd and hoped you'd buy it. Alright, so gotten that out of the way. I usually don't like early access titles, but this one's worth checking out. So Darkest Dungeon's a dark, gothic, roguelike, turn-based RPG. Man, that is a mouthful, but it gives you a decent expectation of what you're getting yourself into. It's a game all about RNG, random number generation, which means there's a lot of randomness to the game, and death. Those are your 2 core things. Being able to manage and mitigate those 2 things is really your only recipe for success. And furthermore, the stress mechanic in the game, which I've never really seen in any other game, it's killer app, its big thing, is what gives Darkest Dungeons its really unique flavor. So first, let's jump into Darkest Dungeon's story. So you play as an exiled nobleman who has fled his manor after his ancestors had opened a pit to hell or some sort of demon realm in the basement. So you've taken off from your manor, and the nearby town of Hamlet and your manor is now in complete ruin and despair. But you've decided to return and begin to commission a team of adventurers to go back to your family's estate and clear out the bandits, the demons, and the mutant pig creatures that now inhabit it. This nobleman will also act as a narrator during many of the cutscenes and will kind of throw in little quips while your adventurers are dungeoneering, depending on what's going on. And I actually want to take a minute to talk about this nobleman narrator character who's also quasi-you, because he's the person who's organizing all these adventurers into a group. He's the only voice actor in the game. Everyone else just communicates through text or sound. So being the only voice actor, there's a lot of weight on his performance. And he kind of has to keep up this dark and hopeless tone. And I feel like there was a lot of opportunity for the voice actor and the art director and the writers to make this character slightly insane, or even just batshit off the walls insane. But they didn't do that. They ignored that trope and cliche and instead went in a different direction. The narrator instead just kind of has a voice of melancholy hopelessness. Even when he does have a more positive line, like after your party gets a critical hit or defeats an encounter, he quickly slips back into this tone and reminds you that you're probably fucked in the long run anyways. Alright, but back to the main story. That is to say, back to the main story that doesn't really matter. Like, right off the bat, this is not a narrative-based game, if that's what you're looking for. The story is there to set a tone and a mood, and unlike, Link or a Diablo hero when you're dungeoneering and you're some ultimate badass who just laughs at the face of danger and jumps headfirst into disease-infested hellspawn holes straight out of whatever shitty horror movie came out this month. Instead, your party's terrified, and situations can go from bad to, oh my fucking god, my entire party just wiped, I hate this game so much, in a matter of seconds, and that is all really the story is trying to convey. There's a cutscene in the beginning. After that, there's a tone and a theme behind the entire game, but you're not going to miss out on anything by not knowing the story. So let's move on to, I usually say graphics, but we're just going to call it art style for obvious reasons. So the art style really does a good job reinforcing this narrative. They went with a stylized 2D hand-drawn aesthetic that really it sets the mood for this gritty dungeon crawler. You're moving through the environments of plague-riddled, dilapidated shit, and the bleak color palette never lets you forget it. There are not many animations. Each class has a basic walking animation, but attacks are not animations per se. They're more of the character drawn in an attacking pose, and they semi-pop out from the background. This isn't some AAA title with amazing graphics. It's an indie game, it's stylized, it gets the job done, it gets the point across. So let's go move on into gameplay, which is, for a game like this, obviously the most important thing. Darkest Dungeon has a turn-based combat system. If you've played any Final Fantasy games, Pokemon games, Dungeons & Dragons, you're fairly familiar with this system. Works in the same way. Based on a character's speed, stats, and orders determined, each side kind of takes turn going. Not necessarily one side all goes, then the other side goes, but depending on your speed score or initiative, if you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons, that's how it works. There's a few different status effects that can buff, debuff, or damage your character. This is all standard RPG affair. If you played one RPG, you've played them all. There's an item system where you can upgrade your weapons and armor linearly, so you kind of get weapon rank 1, weapon rank 2, weapon rank 3, and that's just bought with in-game currencies. It's not something that drops. There is an item drop system in the form of trinkets, so the trinkets are really interesting in this game because, like everything in this game, the trinkets are all about trade-offs. You usually will gain some stat, but you'll lose some stat. So when you're going to build your character, you need to be very wary of what you're giving up. If you don't maybe want to give up a ton of accuracy on a character whose job is to stun people, for example, while a damage dealer, maybe you would be okay giving up accuracy for a higher crit chance, depending on what you're building. These standard RPG elements isn't what makes Darkest Dungeon stand out, though. They have two pretty unique gameplay mechanics beyond the fact that death is a mechanic I haven't really seen in any other games before, in the form of a positioning system and the stress system. And the stress system we'll go into definitely more detail about because it's really what the entire game is built around, is this stress system. But let's talk about positioning first. So as you've probably noticed in the gameplay footage behind you, the party's kind of walking in a line here, and there's slots, 1 through 4, kind of going from right to left. Every one of your adventurer's abilities can only be used from certain slots. For example, most of your tanky characters are naturally better suited for the front, hacking people's limbs off, while a highwayman or a jester are a bit more versatile. Playing a highwayman from the 2 slot or the 3 slot could be a very different skill set and a very different build that would fit into those slots. For example, I like to run my Plague Doctor from the back, but I've seen a lot of people who run a Plague Doctor from the 1 or 2 slot as more of a melee class or a support class, and then do a bunch of casters in the back. Also, all your abilities can only hit enemies in certain slots, meaning that you can make a party-focused build that's more about hitting the back line all the time, or maybe one that stuns the back line, and then you go toe-to-toe with the people in the front. And that generally means your tanks aren't going to be, bypassing 3 people and then hitting a caster in the back. So as they continue to add more classes in, which is something they are still in the process of doing, it's going to add a level of experimentation and discovery and party building that'll be interesting to see how it evolves, and will add more replay value to the game if you're able to try different things. Alright, so now the stress system. The stress system is something new. I haven't ever seen something like this in a game before. Again, it fits into the whole tone and theme of the game, which is dealing with the stress of adventuring. On top of managing your health, you've probably seen this little white bar that's down there, and that is your stress meter. If a character gets 100 out of 100 stress, a few things could trigger. He or she could find new resolve and get a buff that makes it so they're less resistant to stress for the rest of the run, and you could even, increase their damage, give them more health, have them take less damage. But that's pretty damn rare. I've seen it happen once, and oh my gosh, was I so lucky I almost creamed my pants. But more often than not, it's going to be a negative effect. You could lose total control of your character, where if he just decides to attack whatever target he wants with whatever ability he wants for no rhyme or reason for the rest of the dungeon. He could go totally suicidal. He could start stressing out the rest of the group, and new consequences are still being added. But you can see how managing this is important. It is the barometer of, oh my god, everything just went to shit. If more than one party member gets max stress, it is very hard to continue. Even with one, it can become very hard if it happens on someone who's really integral to your group. All right, so how do you manage this? How do you be good at this game and not have all your people just die over and over again? So the way you gain stress is you only gain it on missions when you just have them sitting in town in Hamlet. Doesn't really matter at all. But stress will be carried over from mission to mission if you don't deal with it. So the simplest way to get stress is just passively. As you walk through the dungeon, your party will get more and more stressed. It just happens. You can mitigate this a bit by keeping a high light level. You'll bring torches with you into the dungeon, and by popping a torch, it'll raise the light level up. So if you have max light level, for example, you get a scouting bonus, which pretty much will let you see what's ahead of you, if there's traps or if there's treasure in a next room, things like that. And you have a better chance of surprising monsters. And all really that means is your entire team gets to go before they even get to attack. So that's nice. But there's a flip side of the coin. You could have a low light level. If you keep a low light level, you get more stressed. Monsters have a higher accuracy and crit chance, but you get a better chance at loot, those trinkets dropping, and a better chance at better loot. So some people who've put a ton of time in this game, you can go look at some of the Let's Players who are running this game. They like to do these low light runs, which are insanely nail-biting to watch, and I have to keep a damn defibrillator next to me if I watch it, so I don't stress out a ton. But that's where the hardest core of the hardcore come in, is you build your super amazing team, and you go on these low light runs to try and succeed. Alright, so you'll also get stressed if anyone in your party gets crit. Pretty much your entire team will get stressed from that. And there are enemy abilities that can add stress in lieu of damage. Generally, maybe it'll hit you for 1 or 2, but beyond that, it doesn't matter. So how the hell do you get rid of the stuff? Because obviously, if you're just getting more stress and stress and stress, you're just on a time limit before you hit 100. That's not really the case. You are able to mitigate stress while you're on a mission. Getting critical hits will mitigate stress for the entire group. If a character gets a kill, that is a chance to mitigate stress for them. If you go on a longer mission, you'll be able to camp. Every character has a couple of different camping skills, it's called, and a lot of those will mitigate stress or heal or give other buffs, but mitigate stress, the big one. However, the main way you're going to be able to lower stress is in the town, so you have to finish the mission. So you can spend some gold to send your adventurers to the bar, to pray, to confess their sins, or if you really want to be nice to them, you can even send them down to the brothel. And then you get their stress back to 0. This means when you're dungeoneering, you need to make enough gold to de-stress your team, resupply your next team so they can go out, because the de-stressing process will take one mission to complete. So this means you're kind of needed to have an A team, a B team, maybe even a C team, because there'll always be people who are kind of sitting out. They're sitting on the bench. But this allows for a lot of customization. You're not just going to make one amazing team and stick with it. 1, because probably people will die in your amazing team eventually. And 2, there's going to be some point where maybe not the entire party's overstressed, but there's going to be somebody, and you're going to have to run that B team or C team or combination of an A and B team, whatever works for you. So if you haven't noticed yet, I really like this game. It's still in early access, but it's completely playable. As I said, it's supposed to come out in Q3 2015, but I still do have a few problems with it. And these are hopefully something they get to before release. First, there's no real graphical settings, which is fine. It's 2D. Almost any computer is going to be able to run this game. But if you want to change aspect ratios or go from full screen to windowed mode, you have to restart the whole client. It's 2015. This shouldn't happen. Plenty of games don't have this problem. It just, I don't want to say it breaks an immersion factor. It's a minor grievance, but having to restart an entire game is ridiculous if I just want to pop into windowed mode, when most games it's just you hit a hotkey now and you can just pop in and out of it as much as you want. Second, I don't really know if this game has legs yet, that is to say if it'll stick around. It's fun to level in it, it's fun to experiment, It's really fun because that you can name your party whatever you want. So just name it after all your friends and then get them brutally murdered by mutant pig people. And that's actually is maybe the best part of the game. But if they could knock the trinket system up a notch, if they can make grinding for loot a major part of the game, especially at in-game, I think it would add past, maybe the 20 to 30 hours you're going to get out of this game, because there will be streamers and, well, I guess just the average person who's going to be grinding out this fat loot. And everybody knows that gamers love getting fat loot. I mean, I'm an MMO player. I love that kind of system if it's done well. Eventually things can get old, but still it'll add past your 20 or 30 hours you're going to get with just experimenting with classes. They do have those low light runs, which is to get you better loot, but it's more of just making it part of the design philosophy. Trinkets are there, but I don't feel they're integral to gameplay or integral in the developer's scope what this game should be. And it would be perfect. Low light runs, and if you're running out with your elite level 5 team, and then you just get obliterated, and you lose your trinkets if you die, if they're equipped on characters who die, it'd be absolutely heartbreaking, but it would make you that much more want to build up another team and go kill that motherfucker who just took you out. Alright, so Darkest Dungeon, early access on Steam. I'll put a link in the description. It's $20 right now. If you're looking for a new turn-based RPG and don't mind a little RNG, this game is definitely for you. I'm Ranlif. This has been my review. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And remember, keep on gaming.